Welcome to the Revival Method podcast, where we teach you actionable steps that you can take to start moving, thinking, and feeling better. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Revival Method podcast. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Brandon Parker, and I specialize in helping busy people move and feel their best so they can actually show up better in other aspects of their life. But today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Most of my episodes are packed with information and actionable steps, but I think today is all about just telling a story that I thought I told in the past, but to my surprise, I haven't. And it was actually a very pivotal point in my life. It actually changed how I operate today. And I feel like if anybody's in a similar circumstance, they can pull a lot from my experience. So just to give you some foreground or background, I should say, my wife and I have been together for 12 years, and 13 now. Prior to us getting married, it was 12 years of dating, and we finally said, what are we waiting for? Let's get married. We don't need a big wedding. Let's just plan it now. Like let's in a month from now, let's get married. And of course, the impulsive nature of that forced a lot of things to get done in a small amount of time. We had to pressure wash the house. We had to restain the deck. We had to do a lot of landscaping. We had to make it wedding appropriate, right? And then on top of that, we actually had to plan all the aspects of the wedding. Seating arrangements, linens, how are people going to enjoy themselves? If they're drinking, how are we going to make sure they get back to their home safely? Every little thing had to be planned. Of course, we picked August of all time, so it's 105 degrees out while we're doing all these chores. We really wanted to make it hard on ourselves. But needless to say, we were able to get it done. But during this time, I was working a full-time job, still am working a full-time job in person. I'm also attempting to be an online entrepreneur and helping people online. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to rub sticks together, which already brings its own stress aboard. I have 3 cats that always are fighting each other, waking me up in the middle of the night. And on top of that, we had a wedding, right? So that was very stressful, but that was actually the beginning of the storm, the calm of the storm, if you will. But here's where it got pretty crazy. Before our wedding, the night before our wedding, we were having just a get together. Family flew in from out of town, and we were at the local bar. I was the designated driver, and my wife was having a good time, just like everyone else. And it was time to go home. We had to get our beauty sleep before the big day. Everyone starts to roll into the car. My best man says everyone's in the car. And I was like, all right, cool. I took my foot off the brake for a split second. And that was enough time for me to roll over my wife's foot. That's right. Everyone who's listening, I hit my wife I ran over my wife with a car, not a golf cart, not like some type of shopping cart, a full-blown car. Ouch, right? And luckily enough, with enough liquid courage, she was able to go through with the wedding, walk on the foot, but we knew we had to do something about it. We got an MRI for it. We got an X-ray for it. And it was very puzzling. There wasn't any breaks, but there was something clearly wrong with the foot. So we take her to a podiatrist, and she's even, scratching her head. So she references a Harvard-trained MRI specialist to give us the answer that we were looking for. My wife had a rare condition called compartment syndrome, whereas the area that is swollen or has the syndrome, the muscles swell to a point where everything beneath that point no longer gets blood flow. So we're running the risk of permanent nerve damage. So she had to get rushed to the hospital. We had to get multiple surgeries to make sure that the pressure was relieved. And that was pretty hard, because not only was I having the guilt of me running over my wife's foot the day before our wedding, but now she has this rare condition that required her to get surgery. And then looking at the research, she had less than a 5% chance of full recovery. That is very hard, because now I'm looking at my wife, who I potentially hurt, not for a temporary amount of time, but for a lifetime. So all the stuff that I mentioned before, 2 jobs, bunch of kids, a bunch of cats, managing a house. Now we're adding the stress of rehabbing my wife's foot, that we're already fighting an uphill battle of only a 5% chance of full recovery. But then on top of that, you have to consider everything else. It's not just about the rehab. It's about being a husband and showing up for her. You had to make sure that she was able to go to and from the bathroom, taking showers, making sure she's fed, making sure that this is something blew my mind. So she wants a glass of water. Okay, yeah, I'll go grab it for you. But remember, as soon as she finishes that glass of water, you have to grab the cup and either refill it or like put it away and wash it. So like every step that's in your head, double it, right? Because she could not move at that time. So that's happening, right? I have a full-time job at the office. I have a full-time job online. I have a full-time job being a caretaker to my wife, which I am the reason why I need to take care of her. I was unbelievably worn down to the point where I was getting sick all the time. I was waking up with panic attacks because I just didn't know what I could do because I had so many things going on. My my in-person job asked me like, is everything okay? Like, you look rough. And it made me realize that I if I don't simplify things right now, it's like something's going to break. And there's no way I wasn't going to show up for my wife. There was no way that I wasn't going to not work, because that's also inadvertently showing up for my wife and being the breadwinner at the time because she couldn't even go to work, right? I knew that I had to figure out a way to balance everything. And of course, my health was not in its prime shape, but I was able to do something that I think a lot of you can start to use yourself. I made a non-negotiable list. I thought to myself, even on my worst days, what can I do for myself that's going to make sure that I can show up for everybody better the next day? And it made me simplify my current workout routine, my day-to-day life tremendously. Instead of like having 100 tasks on my to-do list, I broke it down to like 4, right? And that allowed me to weather the storm, but also I was making gains in the areas that I was pretty much stagnant in before that. And this was kind of a great example of where more is not better. Better is better. And it made me realize that even in this time of my life where every second was spoken for, I was still able to make progress. I was still able to show up for myself. And that was all because I had a game plan that fit within my current lifestyle. So that's the big thing that I want to point out first is, when in doubt, when you are weathering the storm, you have to take the time to take care of yourself. Because if your cup is empty, you cannot pour into other people, which means you're not going to show up for your kids. You're not going to show up for your loved ones. You're not going to show up at your job. So, whatever you love and you really want to be your best at, if you have an empty cup, there is no way you're going to be able to perform at a level that's going to make you feel good. And if you're like me, who I would consider myself a high achiever, when you don't show up at your best, that even adds more stress to this never ending vicious cycle of anxiety and poor recovery. So that's the one thing I wanted to point out, right? I wanted to really point that out. And I guess I should take a moment and give you a brief. I'll actually, if you are interested in this, I will give you the exact rehabilitation program I did for my wife, where now she's moving and walking and doing what she wants, completely fine now. We beat the odds, but I think that's a different episode. I don't want to derail my thought process here. But if you want that, just let me know in the Q&A section of the Spotify or in the YouTube channel comment section, or just reach out to me in our community or email. I have no problem talking about it. Okay. So the the thing that I did when I was in this time is I thought to myself, what is the bare minimum approach that I can do? I decided to only exercise 2 to 3 times per week. And in those time periods that I was exercising, they were only 30 minutes long. So if it was a mobility focused routine, I was doing this thing called interset stretching. Interset stretching is when you pick a exercise, let's say squats, where you're targeting your quadriceps and glutes. And then in your time of resting from the squats, you stretch the opposite side of the joint, which is my hamstrings. So I would do, like, let's say a set of 12 that really pushed me on squats. And then while I'm resting, while my quads get a break, I would stretch my hamstrings. And what this does is not only does it allow you to get more work done in a small amount of time, but you also get this really cool effect where when the opposite side of the joint is being worked, you actually get more range of motion in your training exercise, which we know the more range of motion you have, the better effect you'll have at building muscle. And we already talked about how important is building muscle, so I don't have to go down that rabbit hole. So I did interset stretching on my mobility focus days. On my strength and cardio days, I cut down the rest times in a way that I was still allowing my body to recover, but I was always working something to a point where my heart rate was elevated and I was still building strength and muscle. And how I would do that is this. Let's say I'm doing a circuit. I'll start the circuit off with me doing some type of pushing exercise of the upper body. Well, if I'm doing a pushing exercise, that leaves my lower back, or let's just say lower body, and my back to be completely rested after that first exercise. Cool. So I'll do a push, and then let's go ahead and go into some type of squat because they're completely fresh, right? From the squat, then I would cycle back into, let's say, a pulling exercise because remember I said that our back was pretty much fresh from the first and second exercise. And basically, I would just play this game of, all right, how can I continue to exercise, but still allow my body to recover in between each of these movements that I've selected? And you can do that as well. Write down the exercises that you want to pair together, write down what muscles they target, and just make sure that you have enough time in between each one of these movements or it's sequenced in a way that by the time you hit that muscle group again, it's ready to go because it's relatively fresh because I wasn't resting, because I was allowing my muscles to rest while doing other movements, my heart rate always stayed up. So I was able to get my cardiovascular health up, even though I was only sticking to about 30 minutes per exercise routine. So those are two strategies that I used to allow myself to continue to make strides in certain areas of my health, but not it being too time consuming because I didn't have time to begin with. When it came to my nutrition, I did a couple things. I would plan ahead. I'm not meal prepping. I wouldn't do that because I just never liked that idea. But what I did was I made sure that the dinners that I made were in large portions. So if I'm having ground beef, rice, mixed stir fry vegetables, something like that, maybe some beans in there, I would then make enough for either lunch the next day for my wife and I, or maybe a little bit more. It depends on how big of the serving I'd made. But by cooking in large portions and just saving a little bit for the next day, you're offloading the time it would take for you to have a nutritious meal, and you will not fall victim to the heavily processed packaged foods that are heavily convenient to you, right? That was one thing that I did. Another thing is have like shop with lack of time in mind. You know that there's multiple days that you're not going to have time to cook. Don't don't have a failure of planning be the reason why you're going through some fast food restaurant or you have to go eat out at places extremely expensive and time consuming as well. Because if you just know like, okay, 2 to 3 times out of this week I'm going to be unbelievably busy, what are some quick meals that I can make? One of the things that I had is we have a Publix here. I don't know if you all have a Publix, but it's just like a standard supermarket. Every 2 weeks or so, they have a buy two get one free chicken sausage. The macros on it's great. It's about 17 grams per one sausage link, and the saturated fats are pretty low. Calories are pretty low because it's a lean meat, anyways. And in the air fryer, it takes less than 15 minutes for it to cook. So it's pretty mindless. You turn on the air fryer, it heats up. While that's heating up, you're cooking some rice and beans and some mixed veggies. You are done cooking and eating within 15 minutes. So within 25 minutes, I have cooked and cleaned, and now I'm eating my food. So once again, under 30 minutes. So if we were pairing these two strategies together, in an hour, you have eaten and exercised for the day. And then if you're taking it a step further, you have eaten, you have exercised, and you have an additional meal that you can have later because you cooked in large portions. You see what I'm getting at here? In these times of high stress, low recovery, no time at all. We have to think ahead. We have to plan ahead. Okay. Because if you don't plan, you're just going to suffer and you're going to feel like you're on a hamster wheel going nowhere. When it came to my sleep, this is something that has helped me tremendously. I would wake up with panic attacks the whole time because I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to make it ends meet? How am I going to help people online? How am I going to make my wife's foot function properly again? Right. When we have like literally no chance at all. I'd wake up and she would even wake up to me panting, like hyperventilating is a better word. Um, and what has helped a lot is before I went to bed, I would grab a piece of paper. I'm not journaling, right? I'm not talking about how I feel. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just doesn't help me. I just wrote down everything that came to mind, which then kind of turned into somewhat of a to-do list. It usually starts off with just like whatever's on my mind, and then it turns into a to-do list. Whereas when I get it on a piece of paper, I'm good to go. I'm ready to go. Because now that it's on a paper, my brain can actually shut down. It doesn't have to feel the need to keep recycling this thought process to keep it fresh. That helped my sleep a lot. I also started to take magnesium. The magnesium definitely helped me go to bed a little bit faster. I think mine was magnesium L-threonate. And then the other thing I paired that with is the last hour of my day. Of course, I was doing some odds and ends stuff, tying up loose ends, but the last hour before bed, I was stretching. I was making sure that everything was set up for the next day. If you wake up in an environment that's not conducive to your goals, you're going to be spending the first couple hours trying to get ready and in the mindset. But if you already set everything up, so when you wake up, you're in the mindset, you're already much more productive. Plus, you don't have this sense of anxiety of, oh my God, I'm already behind. So, the last hour of the day, I would do some type of stretching routine, nothing really hardcore, nothing really planned. If there's an area that felt tight, I would just hang out there a little bit longer. But the main thing is just to get my heart rate down, to get my brain off of the daily duties, and then to just put myself in a relaxed state. After I would stretch, I would then take a warm shower. This is all within like about an hour before bed. So I don't want you to feel like this is a laundry list by any means. I would take a warm shower. The reason why you want to take a warm shower, you will, when you get out of the shower, your body's going to try to cool yourself down. So instead of taking a cold shower where your body will shiver and try to warm you up, it actually do the opposite. You take a hot shower and it starts to, it tells your body to start cooling your body down with its processes. And then that allows you to get to bed sooner because your brain needs a certain temperature to sleep optimally, which is colder. I don't remember the exact number. Maybe it's like 68, something like that. And then also don't forget, hey, set your AC unit to where it needs to be so you can go right to bed as well. So that helps me tremendously from the recovery side of things. And then the last thing that I think that a lot of people forget, and I fell victim to this as well, where I, in that time of having a really hard time figuring out how to keep things together, I kind of just like I isolated myself. I isolated my wife. Well, the situation kind of isolated us. We didn't really have any outreach, right? We didn't like reach out to people, and we kind of lost that sense of social connectiveness. And that's normal. You're already doing like a million things at once. The last thing that you would want is, or that you're thinking of, I should say, is who can I chat up today? And I was blessed, and I am blessed enough to say that our friends came and checked out on us and just made sure that we were doing good. But without their sense of community, I would have felt like we were much more isolated, and I feel like I wouldn't have been as effective with my stress management. They gave us a sense of reality, almost like an anchor, like, hey, everything's going to be okay. And then, of course, they offered to help us in certain ways. And I don't want you to overlook that either. You have people in your corner. And if you don't have people in your corner, there are plenty of communities of like minded people that are willing to be in your corner because humans are social creatures. We are tribalistic to a certain extent. Find your tribe, right? I mean, if you've been listening to this podcast and you're not in our Facebook group, we're your tribe. Join us, and I want to be able to help you, and so does other people. So I hope that this real life practical advice that has helped me through a very hard time in my life has helped you. And I do plan on utilizing these strategies when kids eventually enter the picture, because just like how I had to nurse my wife's foot together or foot back to health while doing everything else, I can only imagine a toddler running around on top of all these things, right? But yeah, I hope this was beneficial. I will talk to you all next week. Peace.